So let me start with my presentation. Qiyun Beyond Borders, a resonance of Čiurlionis art and Chinese aesthetics. I have three parts, three movements, from Qiyun to Qi, from Qi to the living field, and from the biofield to transformation. Friends and colleagues, it feels special to speak here today among those who continue to look for new ways of understanding Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis. Like many Lithuanians of my generation, I grew up surrounded by his images. At home, we had a large album of his paintings, the one you see on the screen, the same one that many families probably had. I remember its heavy pages, the colors, the quiet sense of mystery they carried. My parents told me that when I was 4 or 5, I would show those pictures to our guests and try to explain their meanings in my own words. Those early feelings stayed somewhere deep and perhaps guided my later curiosity. Many years later, while working in China together with Dr. Sun Min and Dr. Zhang, we discussed the classical aesthetic principle of Qiyun Shendong. It can be translated in several ways: spirit resonance, life movement of energy, rhythmic vitality. It names the mysterious quality that makes a painting alive. I suggested for my colleagues that we might test this idea in an unconventional way. Could Qiyun Shendong be recognized beyond the boundaries of Chinese painting itself? Could we find examples where this vitality is strongly present, or perhaps absent, in other traditions? If we could sense varying degrees of it, that might help us clarify what this intuitive notion really means. Intuitive notion of spirit resonance, or Qiyun Shendong. And naturally, I thought of Čiurlionis. For any Lithuanian, Čiurlionis is a familiar presence. For me, he has always carried that feeling of movement and inward music that the Chinese term hints at. He seemed the right artist through whom to explore such a question. Our plan was modest. Our group's plan of me and my other 2 Chinese colleagues, to see whether the feeling of Qiyun Shendong, and then they talk about Qiyun Shendong. First of all, they talk about some kind of a subjective feeling that they experienced when they watched the paintings. So to see whether this feeling, this living energy, would be felt only in Chinese ink landscapes or also in Čiurlionis. So then my Chinese colleagues saw his paintings for the first time. Their reaction surprised us all. They didn't sense distance or foreignness. What they felt was vitality, motion, breath, the same quiet pulse that animates traditional scrolls. The words they used varied, but the essence was clear. These paintings breathe. From that point, our study was no longer simply about aesthetics or cultural comparison. It became a shared investigation into what kind of energy flows through art and how that energy can be perceived beyond verbal interpretation. A few years later, during the Čiurlionis conference in Druskininkai, I was reminded again how subtle this energy is. Some participants, including myself and a few others, I think Julius Vaitkevičius also was in that conference, spent extended time at home preparing for the conference in silent, nonverbal observation of certain Čiurlionis paintings, simply allowing impressions to arise. Others emphasized the need for a broader overview to see the entire corpus of paintings rather than one work or a few works in isolation. Both approaches have value. Yet, from the perspective of Qi, the Qi energy, Qiyun Shentung, that longer, quiet attention to a single image can open dimensions that discursive analysis often misses. When we stay with a painting long enough, without rushing to explain, the energy of the work begins to move within us. Insight appears not as a thought, but as a resonance, and words come later to describe what has already been felt. Gradually, I began to frame Qi as something delicate, yet real, not symbolic, not merely cultural, but a living continuum that connects artist, artwork, and observer. In modern vocabulary, we might call this continuum the biofield, a term used by physician Rick Eric Leskovitz in his book, The Mystery of Life Energy. Leskovitz describes the biofield as the subtle web that links body, mind, and an environment, what many ancient traditions have called Qi, prana, or pneuma. If we read Čiurlionis through that lens, we see that he was not painting static forms or allegories, but fields of living energy, realities that can touch us directly when we meet them with inward stillness. Once my Chinese colleagues recognized Qiyun Shentung, and now I'm moving to the second part of my presentation. So once they recognized Qiyun Shentung in Čiurlionis' work, our question became deeper. What is this vitality that moves through form, yet is not limited to form? In Chinese thought, Qi is not one force, we could say that, but a continuum of transformations. In painting, it may appear as rhythm, but also in the breathing of color, in the cadence of pattern, in the meeting of forms, in the quiet emergence of symbols. It is the current that allows all these dimensions to communicate. When we call Qi something subtle, by subtle we mean that it belongs to the zone where perception, feeling, and awareness arise together. That something subtle cannot be measured, but it can be felt in the shift of breathing, in warmth spreading through the chest, in the change of inner light, in the small awakening of attention when an image becomes alive. So let's look at a few sonata paintings as some kind of example or test case. So Sonata of the Spring unfolds like a meditation on renewal. Each panel, each painting in the series expresses a different modulation of Qi, a different tone of the same breath. Allegro. Lines rise diagonally. The trees and plants stretch upward. The earth awakens. Here Qi moves in its expansive phase, the Yang energy. The motion is not only vertical, it spirals, as if sound itself were lifting matter. The painting does not describe spring, it enacts the act of arising. Andante, in Andante, the great windmill turning in the sky becomes the axis of the world. Around it, smaller mills repeat the same pulse, macrocosm and microcosm breathing together. The whole composition turns like a musical wheel. suggesting that the breath of the universe is also the breath of consciousness. Scherzo. Energy shifts into water, playful, fluid, transparent. Fish move through currents of light. Nets fall and rise. This is the in phase, the joyful dissolution of boundaries. Qi here is laughter, transformation, flow. Finale. Fire ascends, banners spiral toward the invisible. The ascending light is not an end, but a passage into the infinity. Qi now becomes circular, breathing without beginning or end. Viewed with patience, this sonata reveals not only musical order, but the manifold manners in which Qi energy shifts, condensing, dispersing, resting, awakening. The painting breathes, and so do we. Now, if Sonata of the Spring speaks of the breathing, of the cosmos, Sonata of the Serpent speaks of its metamorphosis, of Qi turning upon itself. In Lithuanian myth, the serpent is a bearer of fertility and wisdom. In China, the goddess Nuwa, half woman, half serpent, creates humankind and repairs the sky. Both traditions see in the serpent the circular flow of creation. In Allegro, the serpent lies beneath the surface. Energy is latent, potential Qi before manifestation. The landscape is quiet, but charged, like breath held. Andante, the body begins to rise, water and cloud interlace, the same spiral reappears, denser, inward life awakening within matter. Scherzo, the serpent ascends, its form becomes translucent. Qi moves between worlds, between what is visible and what is invisible. What the I Ching, the Book of Changes, calls the flying dragon in the heavens. Finale, the serpent dissolves into mountains and mist. Energy returns to landscape, to formlessness. The cycle completes, not by closure, but by dispersal. A quiet return to potential. Our colleague Dr. Jianping compared these stages to the dynamic movements or dynamic moments of the Qian hexagram from the Book of Changes. So this hexagram represents latent, emerging, radiant, self-dissolving processes. Čiurlionis, working far away, painted the same law. Qi energy never ceases, it only changes density, rhythm, brightness. Matter and spirit are two sides of one vibration. So when we contemplate Čiurlionis' works in silence, it is not imagination alone. Something in our field begins to respond. A subtle resonance, almost a shiver, tells us that perception and painting share the same continuum. This is why Qi is difficult to discuss, yet unmistakable to experience. And this is also why it is difficult to discuss Čiurlionis paintings, but sometimes unmistakable to experience. So in modern language, the continuum could be called the biofield, this continuum that I keep mentioning. And in the book that I already mentioned, The Mystery of Life Energy, Leskovitz describes the biofield as a subtle matrix joining organism and environment, a field of information and resonance. His words echo what Chinese thinkers have long intuited. Awareness and vitality are modes of the same reality. Čiurlionis painted directly within that field. His canvases are not objects to look at, but thresholds of participation. If they were mere objects, people would not still carry them in their hearts more than a century later. We are drawn to his paintings because they invite us inside the living field they manifest. To sense qi in these paintings is not to interpret, it is to attune. The more quietly we look, the more vividly the energy answers. And now the last part, movement free, from biofield to transformation. When we stand before Čiurlionis paintings in silence, something happens that analysis can hardly describe. Our breathing changes, though we do not try to change it. Attention deepens, the gaze begins to rest. The boundary between looking and being looked at blurs. The painting seems to look back. At such moments, the artwork and the observer participate in the same energy field, what Chinese philosophy would call the mutual resonance of qi. The viewer's awareness becomes the instrument through which the painting continues to unfold. This perhaps is what keeps Čiurlionis alive in cultural memory. His canvases are not finished events of the past. They are ongoing processes that need our participation to remain complete. In Chinese aesthetics, the artist's qi does not end when the brush leaves the silk. It continues to circulate in the painting and to interact with the qi of each viewer. Čiurlionis created works that function in the same way. His works are thresholds of participation. Every encounter renews their life. That is why generations who never met the artist still feel personally addressed by his images. The endurance of his art, therefore, is not merely historical, it is energetic, the persistence of resonance. When we speak of qi or of the biofield, we are not importing exotic vocabulary, we are naming something humanly universal. All cultures have felt it. The Greek pneuma, the Indian prana, the Polynesian mana. Čiurlionis expressed it through the means available to him: sound, color, light. The forms differ, but the intuition is one. Life is continuous vibration. Art, at its highest level, is the place where that vibration becomes visible. And so, after analyzing forms and rhythms, we return to experience, to the silent dialogue between the energy of the artwork and the energy of the observer. This is the point where philosophy yields to awareness, and research becomes contemplation. Perhaps what Čiurlionis painted was not a landscape, not even a dream, but the very field in which life perceives itself, the subtle luminosity that connects us all. If we approach his work quietly, with attention and openness, we may still feel that living field flowing through us. The painting breathes, and so do we. Thank you.